Now, on a counseling level, I've seen the existential ramifications of this as I've shared with people in counseling situations where people really are vexed and torn, wondering what the purpose of life is, the meaning of life.
The reason that they are so vexed and torn in relation to issues like this is because theists keep feeding them notions about objective and external purpose and meaning that they cannot discern, that they can never discern. No wonder they're vexed and torn. You're telling them things exist that cannot be seen. And the reason they cannot be seen is because, as I said in my response to Jack, or Together for Peace, it's not possible to infer purpose and meaning from simple facts of reality. The facts of reality we perceive are merely chains of events unfolding. There is no basis from which to reasonably infer purpose or meaning from such processes. We simply project our concept of purpose and meaning onto them and pretend that we've somehow deciphered a reality intrinsic to that chain of events. Purpose and meaning are artifacts of consciousness, emergent properties of consciousness, the simple and elegant proof of which is the fact that we define what those things are. If I was to ask you what is purpose, you would have to define it. Since you're defining it, you actually bring it into existence. Purpose is a concept. Concepts emerge from a conceptualizing mind. Purpose only exists and has meaning as a consequence of our definition of it. When you pretend that you have properly inferred or deciphered purpose in some particular state of affairs or simple facts of reality, you are applying your definition of purpose, which is a creation of your mind, to that state of affairs or those facts of reality.
And just know this, atheism, objectively speaking, has nothing to offer there.
That's because there's nothing but made-up, invented nonsense to offer there. Atheism is not in the business of offering that which doesn't exist. If it could be said that atheism was in any kind of business at all, it would be the business of offering reality.
Nor does it have anything to offer along the lines of hope. Hope for the future. There is no hope. Listen, your tomorrow will be like today. Your next year will be like this year. It's all the same.
Your brand of hope is a pack of lies. You live your life like a child who waits all year for Santa Claus to turn up with that really expensive bike he's almost certainly not going to get. What you offer is false hope. Now, that false hope may be in some sense comforting to people. If you want to live in a realm of comforting false hopes rather than deal with reality itself, if you want to live with comforting lies rather than uncomfortable truths, then I suppose that's your prerogative. Just don't pretend that what you're doing has anything to do with reality. By and large, atheists don't really need hope to live by. While Christians are sitting back hoping, atheists are out there doing.
And this is anecdotal. I know this is just kind of random. I realize this is random, but
it's not random, John. What you're about to say is anything but random. It is self-serving, made-up twaddle.
But I personally, on a personal level, I don't think it's a coincidence that, there are many people who state that atheism is on the rise. There's more atheists. And it wouldn't surprise me, especially in this country. There's more atheism is on the rise. Yet, interestingly enough, other disorders are too, like depression and things. I don't think that that's an accident.
Do you realize that you just called atheism a disorder? I suspect you did so unwittingly, but anyway. Can you point to any social statistics or research, John, that demonstrates any kind of positive correlation between this supposed rise in mental illness and the rise in atheism? Can you point us to such information? I suspect you cannot. And I also hope you realize that attributing a positive correspondence between two social realities that appear to be on the rise without any evidence of a positive correlation is a glaring logical fallacy. You might want to visit a logical fallacy site and see if you can figure out which one it is.
And and that really kind of gets into this next area too. It has to do with morality. There's no basis for morality also.
And yet, even though there's no basis for atheist morality, atheists manage to have ethical views and be moral people. I think I might be on the verge of believing that miracles are possible.
Now, I would like to clarify something. I here would never say that atheists are immoral people. That's not the case. Listen, I know atheists who live fine moral lives.
How is that possible, John? How can they live moral lives if there is no basis for their morality? If there is no basis for their morality, then their morality can't actually be moral. So, in your rather transparent effort to appear reasonable, you end up pretty much contradicting yourself.
What's the basis for morality? What is the basis for morality?
The answer to the question, what is the basis for morality, lies in the answer to the more essential and far more important question, what is morality? And that's a question theists never ask. They're always crapping on about the basis for this, the basis for that. What's the basis for purpose? What's the basis for meaning? They never ask, what is purpose? What is meaning? What is morality? As soon as you've answered that, you have the answer to all those questions about the basis of these things. So let's get on with the actual work of answering that question. What is morality? What is a moral principle? What is a moral judgment? A moral principle and a moral judgment are nothing more or less than a logical principle and a logical judgment. That's all moral judgments actually are. They are logical judgments. When we judge things to be morally good or bad, what we are actually doing is making a judgment about the efficacy or the merits or demerits of a particular circumstance with respect to certain goals or desired outcomes or value sets. All moral judgments arise out of those things and are made relative to them. When you say a thing is morally bad, you're making a judgment about it measured against some kind of goal or value. So, for example, if we say that divorce is immoral, we say it because A, we have the goal of marriage being stable in society, and B, we value marriage sufficiently to see any dissolution of marriage as a detriment to the existence and proper functioning of marriage. Our moral judgment is simply a logical judgment made against those goals and values. If you stop to examine any moral notion that you hold, any moral judgment you've ever made, you'll be able to see that it did in fact arise relative to some kind of goal or value framework, and that each of those judgments is really just a logical judgment, one where the relative efficacy of a given circumstance is measured against those things. This is one of the reasons that two people can witness the exact same set of circumstances and yet make completely different moral judgments regarding them. And it's because they measure the nature of that set of circumstances against their specific goals and values and so forth. This is why different cultures and different generations can hold different moral viewpoints. It's why social morality and mores built on moral principles are fluid and evolve. If I was to say to a crowd of people, hands up all those who think human sacrifice is morally wrong, every hand would go up, except for the smart-ass Aztec over there in the corner who's flicking me the bird. The reason that we can have competing moral viewpoints when people are experiencing essentially the same states of affairs is because no objective goals and values are given to us. They differ from one person, one culture, one generation to the next. Now, it's true that we do have certain collective and quasi-universal moral principles, but there's no real significance in that observation. It's to be expected. We are, of course, all members of the same species, who share essentially the same consciousness, and more or less the same experiences of reality and of each other. So it's entirely to be expected that we would share certain moral principles, and indeed certain goals and values, such as happiness, for example. There's no more significance in this quasi-universal existence of moral tenets than there is in the observation that most beavers gnaw on trees and build dams. Now, of course, it's not always the case that we are consciously aware of the goals and value frameworks from within which we make particular moral judgments. And indeed, it's that very lack of consciousness of the goals and values that we actually possess that causes us to think that our moral principles and moral judgments arise from somewhere else, or have some kind of intrinsic reality, or are visited upon us by the goodness fairy. But once you gain a conscious awareness of the goals and values that you actually possess and express, you can immediately see that this is where your moral principles and judgments come from. And you understand that those things are in fact the basis for your morality in its entirety. So, John, I challenge and encourage you to sit down and consider all of the moral tenets that you have and think about them relative to your goals and values. I think you'll find that you can in fact place every single moral judgment you've ever made, every single moral principle that you have, within the framework of those things.